Good morning, Coalition of Concerned Republicans. My name is Mike Levine. I'm here with my colleague Chuck Benoit. We are restoring our American Republic, and this is a really heavy lift, ladies and gentlemen. So today, and over the next couple of episodes, until we exhaust the subject, we're going to start talking about how we actually got into the mess we're in, how to recognize it when you're taking a look at the political landscape, and then we can figure out what to do about it. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look. I think most people that watch this broadcast will agree that the establishment is in control of the government, and you can take that at any level you'd like. I would say the cities are could be, depending on which city you're talking about, are probably in a little better shape than the certainly federal government. And then you take a look at the counties. We're going to take a look at that as well. We're going to start on that today. We're going to talk about how we got into this situation and maybe what we can do about it. So let me talk to my friend Chuck here, get Chuck involved. Chuck, can you come on?
Good morning, Mike.
There you go. Okay, Chuck, so you've had an opportunity to kind of review my outline there. What are your comments as we lead our audience through this extraordinarily important subject matter?
I guess my first comment is you start off back in 1845. I thought that was kind of interesting. You want to get to the grassroots, the absolute beginning of the beginning of Florida politics, and I think possibly you might have found the starting point. So would you like to start there?
Sure. Well, let me just say to you that that's one of the really beautiful things about Lake County is that there's quite a few people here in Lake County who can probably recant the history of the state of Florida back to 1845. And it's no surprise that they're the same people that are in charge of it today. Their families settled the state of Florida. So my opening point here, Chuck, would be that if your family blazed the trails, endured the yellow fever and all the other stuff that was associated with civilizing this land that we call Florida, you very well might feel that you're entitled to run it. What do you think, Chuck?
It's certainly a possibility.
Why not? You did it. Nobody would be here without you. If it wasn't for your family, nobody would be here without you. And you just happen to be a major landowner in the state. Maybe you own thousands of acres of land. And, that gets us right into the property rights situation. Why do these people believe that they can do whatever they want with their land, regardless of the impact on their neighbors? And the reason is because their great-great-great-great-granddaddies settled the place. And we lost family members to disease and all that, settling this swampland. And my family's paid the price. And I'm not talking about my family because we didn't settle the state of Florida, but people who did say, my family paid the price to settle this place. So therefore, our economic interests prevail over the economic interests of others. Chuck?
Yeah, so your next point is that somebody, they, I guess, make it hard to control the levers of governmental power. And you're concerned about unchartered counties, too. They have to achieve legislative victories at a state level in order to affect any change in local community. And of course, Lake County is one of those unchartered counties.
Chuck, we recently put on this broadcast a breakdown of the chartered counties versus unchartered counties. If my memory serves me correct, there's 67 counties, obviously, in the state of Florida, but I believe 46 of the 67 are unchartered. So what I'm saying to you is this Florida politics thing is no accident. The stakeholders around the state do this intentionally. They do it together. They collaborate on this thing so that they retain control. So, like, for example, if you put a charter on your county, then local residents can influence the way the county is run, okay? And that's the only way you can apply any legislative or statutorial leverage over what goes on in your county. So the next step becomes, it's really interesting, Chuck. As I dig down into this thing, and you look at Orange County next door to us, who is a chartered county, and you say to yourself, well, why does Orange County have a mayor? And the reason Orange County has a mayor is because they are chartered. And when you charter, you typically break the form of government into the legislative side and the executive side. So the mayor is on the executive branch of the government in Orange County, and the commissioners are the legislative side. So that, reflects, if you just think of the federal government or even the state government, that's how that's run. So if you get into whether it's a good idea to charter or not, and keep in mind, the county manager here in Lake County would probably be the closest thing to a mayor because he actually carries on the business of the county. But if the county was chartered, you might have a physical mayor, and then, the mayor would become the executive branch. So the question becomes, what is the cost of government by doing that? And it could be more, it may not. But it certainly would then address some of the continuity of public office that we're going to talk about a little later in this episode, Chuck. Did I make that clear? Do you understand that, Chuck, or do I need to explain it differently?
I think we've gotten through that point. Our next point, I guess to finish up that point, you feel like this is intentionally, and it makes it much more difficult for local citizens to affect meaningful change at the local level. That's this unchartered county.
That's correct. So let me just make sure I put a bow on that. So of course, if you can all meet down at the county courthouse and recommend an amendment to the county charter and get that done inside the county, then I would suggest that rank and file voters have more influence over their county government than if you have to go to Tallahassee and propose legislation that affects not only your county, but all the unchartered counties in the state of Florida. That is a much heavier lift. So by design, we don't want, if you're a stakeholder, you don't want a chartered county because those rogue citizens might walk into your county commission chamber and somehow persuade those 5 commissioners to adopt your amendment to the charter. And that would put you in a lot less control than when these uninformed voters have to caravan up to Tallahassee and organize their thoughts and make a compelling case sufficient to influence the legislators in the state government who probably agree with the stakeholders, Chuck. So it just makes it much more difficult for local citizens to affect change in local government, Chuck.
Yes, okay. So your next point has some numbers on it. I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. You say at-large elections compared to single district elections, and you point to 277,000 registered voters here in Lake County in 5 county commission districts. And then you have some numbers breaking out the Democrats, Republicans, etc. So what do you have to say about this one, Mike?
Okay, Chuck. So basically, this is a huge, big deal that when you run for a school board seat in Lake County or a county commission seat, it's an at-large election. So when you start looking at it, and there's 277,000 registered voters in Lake County, and if you have to market to all 277, or even if you break it out with super voters, let's just say that a candidate is only going to market to super voters, and let's just say that super voters are 20% of the 277,000, you still have to market to 55 to 60,000 voters. So now let's take a look at it from the other perspective. If we were having single districts, then the 277,000 voters would be broken into 5 districts, and you'd basically have 55,000 voters in a single district here in Lake County, Florida. And if 20% of those are super voters, now you're marketing to 11,000. So typically, that makes, that's a much less expensive to market to 11,000 or 12,000 voters than it is 55,000 voters. So that is another component of this. By design, we have at-large elections in Lake County, Florida, because stakeholders know that the average rogue, hair-on-fire local activist has a much less chance of raising enough money to market to 55,000 voters than they do 12,000 voters, Chuck. So in order to maintain control, we have at-large elections, not single district elections, because it makes it much more difficult for that newcomer to the political scene to win, Chuck.
There you go. So your next point here is that you feel that they're trying to settle the election in the primary. Republicans always win the elections in Lake County, Florida. So everyone seems to be registering Republicans regardless of ideology. And I believe that is something that I might attest to doing a lot of voter registration drives. Actually had a mayor come up to me. It was an ex-mayor, and she was a Democrat, and she said to me, well, you know, I was told, I'm thinking running again, and I'm told that I should run as a Republican. What do you think? I just looked at her until she was a little uncomfortable, and then she left. But yeah, the idea, she was a Democrat, but she wanted to win the race, so she was going to consider registering as a Republican. Very interesting. I think that's part of your
Chuck,
point
you really
there.
can't blame people like that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
if they run as a whatever, no party affiliation, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, let's go through those numbers. Are we going to go through those numbers, Chuck? 133,000 registered Republicans in Lake County, Florida, with let's see, 25% of the ballot of the voter registrations are Democrat, 25%
Yeah,
are
we can get that
NPA. So
back
they're
up
about
there, yeah.
so there's about 65,000. Is that the number, Chuck? Democrats.
Democrats 68,285.
And then the NPAs are just less than that. So the Democrats and the NPAs are like fighting for second place, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Although the NPAs are not fighting. You know what I mean?
No.
That is just a natural thing that 25% of the electorate says, I don't like either one of the political parties, so I'm just butting out, knowing that they actually have no voice in their government at all. Because as we're seeing the rage right now in Lake County about people registering as write-in candidates to close an election so that the entire electorate does not have an opportunity to vote in that primary. And we can get into that in another episode, Chuck, because people do need to understand that. And, I have feelings on both sides of that argument. So maybe we'll address that in another episode. But isn't it interesting that, basically what you're saying is, I was concerned, our friend Tom Vail is running for the House District 25 against Taylor Yurkowski down in the south part of Lake County. And I would, that's the most liberal, the most Democrat voter registrations are down there in HD 25 in that Four Corners area up through the city of Claremont, that area.
Yeah.
So I was concerned as Tom entered into this race that he could, if he defeated Taylor Yurkowski in the primary, he could lose in the general. But after I'm looking at these numbers again, I think that, as he pointed out, as we were having this conversation, that I think the probability of a Republican, even in the most blue precincts in Lake County, the chances of Republican losing is pretty low, Chuck.
I'm down here in what I feel like is very, very Democrat infested areas down Four Corners area. I've done a little demographic on my community, and Republicans are still up there, but it's getting closer and closer. I think they're
but there's still a huge spread, Chuck. There's still a huge spread.
Still pretty good size.
We really need to take a look at County Commission District 1. You and I probably need to take a look at that precinct by precinct and see what the voter registration numbers are. And if we really did our homework, we could compare all 5 county commission districts here in Lake County and give people, our audience, a breakdown of the various different party affiliations in each one of the county commission districts. And that would show the risk of losing a commission district in any race, whether it's a congressional race, United States congressional race, or a city council race for that matter. Of course, those are nonpartisan elections. But so anyway, that'd be really interesting to see district by district, commission district by commission district, what the numbers are, Chuck.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
should probably move on and get on to the
Sure.
next subject.
Yeah, your fourth point is the idea, I think, that we're talking about, settling the election in the primary, because Republicans always win. What I don't understand here is Republicans in a single district, approximately 2655. Is that just an average, or what are we talking about here?
What happens here, Chuck, is when, obviously the political subdivisions are designed to have an equal number of voters in each one of those districts. So we have 5 county commission districts here in Lake County. If you take the number of Republicans, right, 133,000, and divide by 5, you're going to get down into that number there, like 26,000, whatever the number is I put on my report. 26,500 and change, right?
Right.
So that just means that if you're a Republican running in a single district, then you only have 26,500 and change Republicans in the district, and only 20% of them are going to vote. So now you're down to the actual number of voters who vote, which is 13,000, basically, right? Plus, a little spattering of inconsistent voters, uninformed, inconsistent voters who turn out. And it's much easier if you're running in a single district to win, because it costs a lot less money to market to 13,000 voters than it does to market to 130,000 voters, Chuck.
There you go. There you go. So moving on to point number 5, I'm going to get this up here because there's some numbers here. Private sector versus government-funded employment. Employment based on bases loyal to employers. So we've got here a breakdown of Lake County School District, public supermarkets, Advent Health Waterman, and Lake County Sheriff's Office.
So those are the top 4 employers in Lake County.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, the hospitals are effectively government funded, right? I mean, everybody's going in there with insurance and Medicare, Medicaid, all that other stuff, right? So, the hospitals definitely lean left, right? They want as many government subsidies they can get. They want a big government. They want, get into the pharmaceutical side of it, the whole thing, I mean, if you want to see, right, a hotbed of leftism, go to a hospital, right? Because they certainly aren't people who believe there should be little family clinics on every corner and doctors should be independent of the hospital and all that. Talk to a doctor sometime, and they'll tell you how much bureaucracy there is in the hospital business. And, so that whole business model of self-directed healthcare with local physicians who have local clients, all that stuff, I don't want to get too deep into it. But long story short, the healthcare system is a major employer here in Lake County, the school district being number 1. And, of course, then we have our constitutional officers all have their employees, and we know how that is, Chuck, because now the constitutional officers want to take control of the Republican Party, which is another component in our little chat here. So what do? They encourage their employees to join the Republican Party and go in there, and we see that. We're going to see it again tonight when the government employees show up to take over the Republican Party, which are completely unideologically aligned with Republicanism, but this is how you control the dominant political party in the county so that the king always gets reelected, Chuck, because there's financial and job security benefits to those employees who work for government agencies and show up at the request of the leader to dominate the political party so that there's no chance of a grassroots Republican winning for the various reasons that we're outlining right now. So we're going to build this case, Chuck, over the next several weeks from top to bottom and just show how the establishment obtains and retains power over the county. And we're going to talk a little bit more today even about how few people over the course of the history of Lake County have actually been in positions of power, Chuck.
Yeah, so moving on to point number 6, you feel like there's an attempt to keep voter turnout low. Citizens employed by major institutions encouraged to vote, whereas citizens employed by private sector institutions are not so much encouraged. Where do you get that information? Where do you get that point from, Mike?
It's just logical. Let's just use the constitutional officers, for example. the constitutional officers, keep in mind, Chuck, this is a very layered program where, just like anything, you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So these guys who settled the state of Florida in 1845, and their families owned all the land, and they felt based on their effort, that they deserved to control the state of Florida. So today, fast forward to today, either their ancestors or people who are aligned with those families are in positions of power today. So they're looking at every component that could possibly affect an election. Keep in mind, these are very sophisticated people. And basically, they're saying, how can we ensure victory at the polls? And we're walking through some of those components. And one of those things would be that if you're a government employee and you and your boss isn't elected, and your boss has your job security and your salary at his fingertips, and the boss walks into an employee meeting one day and says, hey, guys, we got an election coming up. It'd be really great if you guys got out and voted. Okay? So the leader of the organization has a stake in the game. Okay? Their name is going to be on the ballot, probably all by itself, because nobody sees a clear path to victory, so we don't even run. I don't think David Jordan has ever had a contested election. He's our tax collector. I don't believe he's ever been contested, and we'll get into the history of that in one of our upcoming episodes. But so yeah, you want to make sure that you absolutely take any uncertainty out of the election. So let's take a look at it the other side. Okay, let's just say that you are a local building contractor or something like that. You're not an elected person. So obviously, if you start talking politics in the shop, you run the risk of losing employees, right? Because you have some Democrats in the shop, you've got some Republicans in the shop, but if you say something that is inconsistent with their values, then they may leave your firm. They could be a great employee. They could be somebody who's got high skill, great work ethic, great, habits, work habits and everything. You don't want to lose those people. So you just don't talk about religion and politics at the shop. Right? So those people are not encouraged to vote. But government employees know how important it is to vote because their job security and their paychecks and their benefits, by the way, hugely important. Government employees, in my estimation, worked for the government for the benefit package mostly. And they know that it's very important that they turn out to vote to support their boss, who they have a relationship with. But private sector organizations are actually penalized from talking about politics and penalized for encouraging their employees to get out and vote. So government employees vote, and people and businesses that benefit from the government, they're government subsidized, like the healthcare industry. They encourage their people to vote because they want those entitlements to continue. And the North Lake Hospital District, Chuck, is a classic example of that on the medical side. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, our seventh and final point today is the idea of minimized turnover in elected officials and party officials. We'll get that up here. Why don't you kind of talk us down this list of elected officials?
Well, it's so funny because most people today who are involved in local grassroots politics don't even know this, right? But it wasn't too long ago. Actually, 2012 was the turning point when the establishment started kind of losing its grip on government because there was a Tea Party came over, took over. We've already established that the Republican Party is dominant here in Lake County. The Tea Party came into the Republican Executive Committee and took over. And, the stakeholders weren't really threatened by that. They figured, they've got all the money, so they'll just pick up. I happen to be chairman. I was elected chairman in 2012, by the way. So I know this up close and personal, that, the stakeholders just pretty much picked up their little briefcases full of money and left. And I was kind of surprised. I said, well, how come you guys don't stick around and just debate this out? And they said, well, there is no debate, right? We control everything. So we're just going to bankrupt the Republican Party here in Lake County. And you, Mike Levine, will wear the egg on your face because you'll be a colossal failure. And that will deter anyone else from challenging us in the future. Well, guess what, Chuck? It didn't actually work out that way. And that's why we're having this war over the Republican Party, Lake County Republican Executive Committee today. And that's why the tax collector signs up all of his employees for the REC and marches them down there when they have time to vote, and they're never there in meetings when there is no major vote going on. So we can't even get a quorum at the Lake County Republican Executive Committee because the government employees don't show up unless there's a vote for officers and stuff like that, because they're not interested in what's going on. You know, they just do what they need to do to keep their boss in power so that, you know, they can keep their job and they can show their boss that they're a good, loyal employee of the firm and that they deserve recognition and, you know, favorable treatment. So that's what's going on there. So my point here is just to go through the list, you know, that when I joined the Republican Executive Committee in 2010, Georgia Phillips was our state committee woman, and she had been the state committee woman for 40 years. And of course, then we have Ron Phillips, who's Georgia Phillips' son, who actually was the head of the Republican Executive Committee in Washington, D.C. And he's still very active and influential about what goes on here in Lake County politics. And during that same time period, Tom Witherington was our state committee man. And Tom Witherington, at the end of his life, I'm sure he was 80 years old or more, and you know, his health started failing, so he couldn't run for re-election in 2012. And that's what opened the door, actually, to me becoming the chairman of the Republican Executive Committee, because our local chairman wanted to be the state committee man, which opened that slot up. And we can talk about how that all went down in another episode if the audience is interested. But that opened the door, and then the Tea Party basically came to me. I was not a member of the Tea Party, but they came over to me and said, hey, Mike, you know, we think that you could run this party effectively. Would you run for the chairmanship? Which I did. And amazingly, I was unopposed because the stakeholders really didn't think there was any risk of the Republican Executive Committee getting traction. And we can talk about that another time. So you can see 40 years for Georgia Phillips, 40 years for Witherington. And then you get into, of course, the Supervisor of Elections here in Lake County was Emma Jean Stiegel. She started working in the Supervisor of Elections office when she was 18. I think she passed away a couple of years after going out of office at 98 years old. But let's see. So you can see she was the Supervisor of Elections for 42 years. And then, of course, Ed Havel, Kerry Baker, after he was done in the Florida Senate, he ran against Ed Havel and unseated the property appraiser who had been the property appraiser for 36 years. So you can just see how long these people have been serving in office. And then you would get into, then you can even take a look at the county commissioners, right? Welton Cadwell was a long-term county commissioner, and he was unseated probably in 2014, I think that was true. And then, of course, Jimmy Connor, he served on the school board, and he's also a long-term county commissioner. He was unseated in the same election cycle, and that led to this young lady, Wendy Breeden, who's on our list here. Wendy Breeden was the public resources manager for this county, and she started off at the county running the library system for the county, but then she was promoted to public resources manager, and then she became a county. She actually defeated Jimmy Connor to become a county commissioner, and she was only a county commissioner for one term until Kirby Smith defeated her, and of course he's a sitting commissioner today. But of course, Wendy Breeden's family is one of those families that settled the state in 1845. So, you know, her family history, we can get into that in another broadcast as well. So you can take a look at it, and then you get into it. You know, in 2010, when I came on the scene here in Lake County, Sean Parks and Leslie Campione were running for their first term, and of course they were elected. I supported Sean Parks. He told me he was an Eagle Scout, and that's all I needed to know. And here we are, 16 years later. Sean Parks is running again, and I'm sure he'll be reelected. So he'll have, by the time his next term is over, he'll have a 20-year history of serving on the Board of County Commissioners. Leslie, provided she wins, which I think she will, she'll have a 20-year history at the end of this term. So when is enough for them, you know, to turn the reins over to someone else? And that's, you know, so this is all boiling down, Chuck, to the concept of term limits. Because if we don't have term limits, then the same people run the government for centuries, Chuck. And then you can get into, of course, Kerry Baker and Dennis Baxley and I'm sure there's one or two others that need to be on the list. But this is the same thing. You know, Kerry Baker got elected to the Florida House, served 4 years. There was a special election in the Senate, so Kerry ran for the Senate seat. He won that. And then when the property appraiser job, then he decided to come unseat Ed Havel. So you can see that I think Kerry Baker's been serving in public office here in Lake County for 24 years. And then most people don't really know the history of Dennis Baxley, which I've laid out there on the chart. So he ran for 1 term, served for 7 years, and then he laid out again. If once you lay out for a term, then your term limits no longer apply. So he ran again for the Florida House and was elected, and then he got elected to the Florida Senate. So you can see that Dennis Baxley, that looks like 21 to me, right? 7 and 6 and 8 is 21, correct, Chuck? So looks like Dennis Baxley served for 21 years in the Florida legislature. So obviously there's not a lot of turnover going on in these public positions. And I would like, in another episode, I'll talk about the wet blanket on productivity that happens when people don't see the next step in their career, and they never believe, they don't have any reason to believe they could ever be a leader in the county. And that's what we're seeing here in Lake County, Chuck, that the citizens of this county do not see themselves as a part or a beneficiary of the government, because the same people control the government since 1845, when our state was brought into the Union of the United States of America, Chuck.
There we go. Well, thank you very much, Mike. We are out of our time. So why don't you just give us a final, so what?
Well, I'm saying to you, I just said it basically, that, when people don't see themselves as a part of anything, and they don't see, hope is the key word here, Chuck, and I know that'll resonate with you. But when people really don't see the hope of upward mobility, which this political system that we have is definitely gives people the reason to believe that they'll never be included in the benefits of what goes on in government, then they check out. They don't participate. They just basically, they come up with a pretty hopeless situation, which just leads to poverty. It leads to a lack of productivity. It leads to very difficult or very low motivation to start businesses, because the same people that are controlling the government control the businesses too. And they put their boot on the throat of upstarts because they just don't want the competition, just like they don't want competition in government. They don't want competition in business either. So they financially and politically and, utilizing every lever of power, which we will continue to probe as we go through additional episodes here, Chuck. But this is why we have low household income in Lake County, Florida. And, and we can talk about that. I just published on my Facebook page a little graphic showing household income in the 5 counties surrounding Lake County and the 4 counties surrounding Sumter County, Marion County, Orange County, Polk County, and Lake County. And you can see the trajectory of household income, but that's really what it boils down to. When people don't believe that the government works for them, or they have a role in this, or they're a beneficiary of government, then it's very bad for society on many, many levels, Chuck Benoit.
Well, thank you so much, Mike Levine, and thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at Restore Our Rep 76. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic -ROAR. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.